The morning sun rose quietly over Maple Ridge Estates, casting a golden light on freshly mowed lawns and identical mailboxes. It was the Friday before Memorial Day, and Jack Whitaker stood barefoot on his front lawn, anchoring the final piece of his tribute. A full-sized American flag waved gently from a sturdy pole he had installed next to the garden bed. Surrounding it were 3 small wooden stakes bearing the names of his fallen comrades Zesky, Brian O'Malley, CPL Darius Reed, and PFC Emily Shung. Solar-powered spotlights pointed upward, ready to illuminate the display by nightfall. Jack wasn't the type for grand statements. He didn't talk much about the war or his time overseas, but every Memorial Day, without fail, he honored those who didn't come home. This year, he added the placards, quiet, respectful reminders of real names and real lives. Neighbors walked by and waved. "Looks good," Jack once said. "Beautiful tribute," said another. He gave polite nods but didn't smile, not because he was unfriendly, but because the weight of the memories always settled heavier around this time of year. His wife, Linda, brought out a thermos of coffee and leaned on the porch rail. "You okay?" she asked gently. Jack took the cup and stared at the flag for a beat. "Yeah, just thinking about them." But the quiet moment didn't last. At exactly 10:17 a.m., a white SUV rolled to a stop in front of their home. The door opened slowly, and out stepped Karen Holloway, the HOA president, self-appointed enforcer of all things orderly. She was dressed in a crisp white blouse, holding her signature clipboard like a badge. "Morning, Jack," she said without warmth. Jack gave a half nod. "Karen." She approached the display and glanced down at her clipboard. "We received a complaint." Jack looked around. No one in sight. "About the flag?" "No," she said quickly. "About the size and scope of the installation. Solar lights, placards, the height of the flagpole." She tapped her pen on the paper. "It exceeds the regulation limits for temporary yard decor." Jack squinted. "It's not decor. It's a memorial." Karen forced a tight smile. "I understand. But community standards apply to everyone. Displays over 24 inches tall must be pre-approved in writing by the board." This was not. Jack took a slow breath. "It's a 3-day tribute. I take it down every year after the holiday." Karen flipped her rule book open. Section 1 for B, subparagraph 3. "It's still a violation." Linda stepped down from the porch. "Karen, you've seen Halloween setups taller than this on the street." Karen ignored her. "You'll need to remove the display by Sunday morning. Otherwise, we'll have to issue a fine, $100 per day." Jack didn't answer right away. He looked at the flag, at the 3 names, at the soil beneath his feet, still soft from where he planted them that morning. "I'm not taking it down," he said finally. Karen stiffened. "You'll be in violation." He met her eyes. "I serve so people could fly this flag. I'm not removing it because someone finds it inconvenient." Karen's voice was clipped. "Then we'll proceed accordingly." She turned and walked briskly to her car, her heels clicking against the pavement. The SUV pulled away without another word. Jack stood there for a moment, then looked at Linda. She gave a small nod. "We'll handle it," she said. But Jack didn't move. He looked at the flag one more time, now fluttering with a quiet defiance, and realized this wasn't going to be a simple disagreement. It was going to be a fight. Not the kind with guns or orders, but the kind where pride and principles collide with power and pettiness. Jack knew that look in Karen's eyes. It wasn't about the flag. It was about control. And she didn't like being challenged. The breeze picked up, rustling the flag just enough to make it whisper. Jack stood his ground. Memorial Day was 3 days away. But the battle had already started. By Saturday morning, the tension had already begun to settle like dew on the lawns of Maple Ridge Estates. Jack's flag display stood untouched in the center of his yard, bold yet solemn. But the real change was happening quietly, house by house, porch by porch. Word of the HOA's demand traveled faster than any official notice ever had. At 8:03 a.m., the Delgados from two doors down stopped by with a plate of warm empanadas. "Mr. Delgado," a Vietnam vet, nodded once at the flag. They tried the same thing with my Purple Heart banner 10 years ago, he said. Didn't have the nerve to call it a nuisance back then. But the message was the same. Jack accepted the plate and gave a quiet thank you. No anger, no rallying speech. Just quiet resolve. Later that morning, Miss Jenny, the retired schoolteacher across the street, planted a small flag near her mailbox. She didn't say a word. She just placed it, adjusted the angle, and walked back inside. By noon, 5 more homes had done the same. The ripple had begun. But Karen wasn't one to let things slide. At 2 p.m., an official HOA violation notice, ARRIVED, sealed in a bright white envelope taped to Jack's door. Inside, typed in firm language, "Notice of violation. Your property has been found in violation of Article 1 for B, subparagraph 3. Non-compliant yard display exceeding permitted height and illumination standards. Immediate correction required. Failure to comply will result in a daily fine of $100, effective May 27th. Jack held the notice in his hand, expression unreadable. Linda looked over his shoulder and sighed. They're really doing it. Jack nodded once and folded the paper, placing it in the kitchen drawer without a word. But the HOA hadn't expected what came next. By sunset, someone had posted a picture of Jack's tribute, along with a short caption, "HOA says this is a nuisance. What do you think?" It was shared on the neighborhood Facebook group. Within hours, comments flooded in. "This is beautiful. How could anyone have a problem with this? Typical Karen behavior. Guess our neighborhood forgot what Memorial Day is about." One comment stood out. "Does anyone know if this violates actual city code? Or is it just a power trip?" Karen herself commented under the post, writing, "We must maintain consistent community standards. This is not about patriotism. It's about visual compliance." The comments section lit up. Back on the street, Karen's pristine white house was unusually quiet. She didn't walk her usual afternoon rounds with the clipboard. No SUV pulling in and out. Just blinds pulled slightly ajar as if watching the street. By nightfall, more flags appeared. Some were small, garden-sized, flapping beside rose bushes. Others were homemade, hand-colored by children. One home even displayed a wreath with red, white, and blue lights. Jack said nothing. He didn't tell people to join. He didn't need to. But when he checked his mailbox later that evening, he found another note. Not from the HOA this time, but handwritten online paper. "Mr. Whitaker, my brother didn't make it back from Fallujah. Thank you for standing up. Lot 27." Linda read it aloud. Her voice broke halfway through. Inside the Holloway house, Karen was making calls, urgent ones. To board members, to her lawyer, to the HOA treasurer. "This is getting out of hand," she snapped. "He's turning the neighborhood against order. If we let this slide, next thing you know, we'll have people putting up political signs, inflatable animals," and she stopped mid-sentence. She realized something. This wasn't just about one flag anymore. It had become a line in the sand, one she had drawn, and Jack had dared to cross. Karen stared at the violation log, tapping her pen nervously. The HOA might have had the power to issue fines, but they were losing control of the narrative, and control, to Karen, was everything. Tomorrow was Sunday. And Jack's flag was still flying. The following morning, Jack woke early. The sun hadn't yet cleared the rooftops, and the quiet hum of sprinklers was the only sound in Maple Ridge Estates, as usual. He walked to the front window with a cup of black coffee and looked out toward the flag. But something was off. 3 of the small solar lights were knocked over, one crushed entirely. The wooden placard bearing CPL Darius Reed's name had been snapped clean into. At first glance, it looked like a careless accident, maybe a strong gust, maybe a wild animal. But Jack knew better. He stepped outside, crouched, and examined the break. The splintering wasn't random. It was deliberate, to clean, to specific. Linda came out behind him. Rope pulled tight. "What happened?" Jack didn't answer right away. He picked up the broken steak, brushing off the morning dew with his thumb. Someone came through here last night. Without another word, he turned and went inside. He pulled up the feed from his front doorbell. Camera, nothing, just silence and a couple of moths fluttering by around midnight. But then he remembered the new motion-activated cam he'd installed along the side yard a few weeks back after a neighbor's tools had gone missing. He clicked into the folder. The screen flickered. A figure appeared, quick, low to the ground, moving in from the sidewalk. They stayed in the shadows, barely illuminated by the porch light across the street. It wasn't a child. It wasn't a raccoon. The shape was unmistakably human. Petite frame, dark clothing, clipboard tucked under one arm. Jack froze the frame. No clear face, no distinct evidence. But something about the posture, the way the person paused near the display, then bent down for a few seconds. He watched the movement, frame by frame, then watched again. He didn't need a confession. His gut already knew. He printed out a still image and took it straight to the HOA drop box. By noon, an official email arrived. Dear Mr. Whitaker, we acknowledge receipt of your submitted footage. As per policy, the HOA is not responsible for investigating or adjudicating private surveillance claims. If you believe a crime has been committed, we recommend contacting the local sheriff's department. Jack smirked. Of course, avoid accountability at all costs. So he did what they suggested. Deputy Harris arrived an hour later. He was younger than Jack expected, but respectful. Do you have any enemies, sir? The deputy asked. Watching the footage carefully, Jack raised an eyebrow. No one that doesn't carry a clipboard. The deputy grinned slightly, then turned serious. This video's not enough to make an arrest. Not without a face. But I'll file a report. It goes on record. Jack nodded. That's all I'm asking. Before the deputy left, he stood in front of the flag. Army, he asked. Jack replied. Marines, my granddad was in the Corps. Would have liked this, the deputy said. I'll make sure this report doesn't get buried. As the day went on, more flags appeared. One house set up a pair of folding chairs with a banner that read We Remember. The Delgados added a small sign that said simply, Leave the flag alone. Inside her house, Karen stared at her HOA group chat. Board member Jeremy had texted, Do we really want to keep pushing this? Feels like we're on the wrong side. Karen didn't reply. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then withdrew. Instead, she texted privately to board member Denise. They're trying to undermine our authority. If we let this go, we lose structure. Denise didn't respond. That evening, Jack replaced the broken placard. He dug a little deeper this time, reinforcing it with a metal base. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he added something new, a hand-painted sign in front of the flag. Scrawled in clean black letters, in memory of Eskidi, Brian O'Malley 1986 to 2007. He can't speak, but I can. Linda came out with 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Jack and looked out over the front yard with him. You think they'll stop? She asked quietly. Jack shook his head. Not yet. From a few houses down, porch lights flicked on. Flags stood firm. The silence of the street felt heavier now. Not tense, but expectant, like a town bracing for a storm. And Karen, watching from behind her living room blinds, knew she was losing something more important than a rural battle. She was losing the neighborhood. Monday evening arrived under heavy skies. Clouds loomed low over Maple Ridge Estates as folding chairs were arranged in the HOA clubhouse for the monthly board meeting. Normally, these meetings were dull, half-empty affairs. Budget updates, landscaping reports, maybe a complaint about overgrown hedges. But tonight was different. By 6:40 p.m., every chair was taken. Residents lined the walls, murmuring quietly, eyes flicking between each other, and the HOA board seated at the long table in front. At the center of that table sat Karen Holloway, posture stiff, lips tight, her signature clipboard in front of her like a shield. Jack stood near the back with Linda, arms crossed. He hadn't come to fight. He'd come to speak, and by the look of the room, he wasn't alone. at exactly 7 p.m. Karen tapped her gavel once. Good evening, everyone. Let's call the HOA meeting to order. First item on the agenda, drainage system budget proposals. She droned on for 10 minutes, her voice dry and mechanical. Deliberately ignoring the simmering tension in the room, Jack waited, silent, patient. Finally, after item 5, mailbox repainting contracts, Karen cleared her throat and read the next line without looking up. Item 6, yard compliance issue, 41st Sycamore Lane. A rustle moved through the crowd. That was Jack's address. Karen adjusted her glasses. We've had multiple reports of a non-compliant front yard display, including height violations and unapproved lighting elements. The board has issued notices in accordance with HOA guidelines. From the back, a voice cut through. Yeah, you mean the flag display? Heads turned. It was Frank Ramsey, the Korean War vet who lived on Maple Circle. Karen didn't answer. Jack stepped forward. I'd like to speak, he said. Come and measure. Karen looked up. This is not an open comment period. Someone else spoke up. Yes, it is. Public forum starts after item 6. It's in the bylaws. Karen paused, clearly rattled. 3 minutes, she snapped. Jack stepped forward to the center of the room. He didn't bring notes. He didn't need them. I want to be clear. I respect rules. I know what they're for. I spent 20 years in the military following orders and structure. I know the value of discipline. But this, what you've done, isn't about order. It's about power. Karen's nostrils flared. Jack continued, voice rising just enough. I put up a flag for 3 friends who didn't come home on Memorial Day weekend. I didn't block traffic. I didn't play loud music. I didn't hang a banner from the roof. I honored the dead. Respectfully, someone in the audience clapped once. Then another joined. Karen banged the gavel. Order. We do not allow applause. Jack ignored her. And what did I get in return? Fines, threats, someone, we all know who, vandalized my tribute in the middle of the night. And instead of investigating, this board handed me more fines. Karen stood now. You are making unsubstantiated accusations. Jack didn't flinch. You want substantiation. Let's talk about your 4th of July barbecue for years ago. Full-sized banners, loudspeakers, parking violations, and it was featured in the HOA newsletter. Karen's face paled. Murmurs surged through the room. One woman pulled out her phone and began scrolling the HOA archives. Jack stepped back, letting the silence speak. Frank Ramsey stood up. This ain't about a flag. This is about who gets to decide what counts as orderly. But if patriotism's a nuisance now, then maybe we need new leadership. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in support. Voices called out, let the neighborhood vote. She's last touch with the people. Karen pounded the gavel again. But the sound was hollow now. Her authority, once wielded so easily, was slipping from her hands. Linder turned to Jack, her voice barely above a whisper. You just lit a fire. Jack didn't answer. He looked toward the window where the sky had started to clear. The last rays of sunlight hit the flag in his yard, fluttering quietly in the breeze. And for the first time in a long time, Jack smiled. Not because he'd won anything, but because people were finally standing up. The next morning, the sun rose over Maple Ridge Estates, but it didn't warm the cold paper taped once again to Jack's front door. Notice of escalated action due to continued non-compliance and public disruption during HOA proceedings. Your homeowner privileges, including voting rights, pool access, and clubhouse usage, are hereby suspended until further review. Further violations may result in legal proceedings as per HOA bylaws. Jack stood on his porch, reading the notice. In silence, Linder joined him, folding her arms tightly across her chest. This is retaliation, she said. Jack nodded slowly, calm but resolute. She's trying to scare us into backing down. But Karen wasn't finished. By noon, Jack received an email from the HOA board, not from Karen, but from the official HOA secretary. It included scans of every violation notice issued over the last 18 months to his address. Some were minor, Things Jack didn't even remember: trash bin placed outside 30 minutes too early. A garden hose left coiled on the front walk. Each violation. Dated and locked. A paper trail. A trap. She's building a case, Jack muttered, flipping through the PDFs. Case for what? Linda asked. Whoever she thinks justifies taking me to court. Or forcing compliance. She's stacking the record to make me look like a chronic rule breaker. That afternoon, Karen pulled up in her SUV, this time with 2 board members and towed Jeremy Lang from Birch Avenue and Nancy Welton from Cedar Loop. They walked up Jack's driveway while he sat calmly on the porch, sipping from a tall tumbler. Jeremy offered a courteous nod. Jack nodded back. Jeremy, Nancy, Karen remained silent, clipboard in hand. Jeremy cleared his throat. We'd like to take updated photos of the front yard for documentation. Jack didn't move. Knock yourself out. Karen snapped photos from several angles. She crouched down, angling her lens beneath the flag and near the placards, pausing longer than necessary. Jack noticed she wasn't just documenting. She was looking for something. Anything to add to her growing list. As she turned to leave, Jack stood. Funny how fast the rules matter when you're the one in charge, he said quietly. Karen turned to face him, her expression unreadable. The rules have always mattered. You're the one choosing to ignore them. You're the one choosing to weaponize them. Jack replied. She stiffened. You're causing division in this community. No. Karen, I'm revealing it. Neighbors across the street watched from their porches. Some recorded on phones. Others just listened. One man live-streamed the exchange to the same Facebook group that had exploded days earlier. By dinner time, the clip had reached 80,000 views. It wasn't just Jack's neighborhood anymore. The entire county was watching. Inside her house, Karen sat in her office, watching the video again, lips tight, foot tapping furiously. She forwarded it to the HOA's legal counsel with the subject line, urgent, defamatory footage, request guidance. But there were cracks forming. That night, Jeremy called Jack privately. I shouldn't be saying this, he said, but we didn't vote on that privilege suspension. She did it herself. Jack leaned forward in his chair. What do you mean? She claimed she had board authority. But no one even saw the draft. Jack paused. That's not just unethical. That's a violation of HOA governance. Jeremy was quiet, then added, she's spiraling. This isn't about the flag anymore. It's about control. Jack hung up, feeling the weight of that word again. Control. That's what this had always been about. Karen wasn't just defending rules, she was defending the illusion of authority. But now her tactics were public. In the neighborhood, it wasn't scared anymore. By midnight, more flags had gone up. Jack's yard wasn't the only battlefield now. The community had chosen sides, and Karen, once unchallenged, was about to face a different kind of pressure, one she couldn't write off with a clipboard. The next morning, Jack opened his front door to find a manila envelope sitting on the welcome mat. No name, no return address, just a single word scribbled across it in black ink. Archives. He brought it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and peeled back the flap. Inside were over a dozen printed pages, HOA newsletters, meeting minutes, and internal memos from past years. Some were marked with yellow highlighter and red underlines. At the top of the pile was a copy of the HOA newsletter from July 4th. 5 years ago, there, in full color, was Karen Holloway smiling in front of a massive 4th of July display in her front yard. 2 inflatable eagles, string lights wrapped around her porch columns, and a giant vinyl banner that read "Freedom isn't free." The caption underneath, "President Holloway shows patriotic spirit." Jack leaned back in his chair, the hypocrisy landing like a punch. She hadn't just ignored the rules, she'd publicly celebrated breaking them. And no fines were issued, no warnings, just praise. "Linda," he called. "You need to see this." She sat beside him, flipping through the rest of the pages. One newsletter after another showed examples of neighbors pushing the boundaries. For holiday celebrations, many more extreme than Jack's tribute. None had faced fines, Most had been a plotted dot at the bottom of the stack. In small print on a memo titled Policy Enforcement Summary Minus 2019 was a handwritten note in the margins, Enforcement Inconsistencies Ray, Holiday Displays, Needs Review. The initials F are followed. Jack knew who that was. Frank Ramsey. An hour later, Jack was sitting on Frank's porch, holding the same envelope. I figured you'd get there, Frank said, sipping sweet tea. I kept records, not just for me, but for folks who didn't know how to fight back. Why me? Because you stood up. And because they're not just trying to shut you down, they're trying to rewrite what community means. Jack exhaled slowly. She's been getting away with this for years. Frank nodded. She thinks the rules apply only when she says they do. That afternoon, Jack delivered copies of the documents to the rest of the HOA board. He didn't include a message, just an envelope on each doorstep. The silence didn't last long. By sunset, Jeremy texted, "Got it, meeting the others tomorrow. Stay close." The very next morning, Jack received an email from the HOA attorney, Mr. Whitaker. The board has received additional documentation relevant to your case and is conducting a full review. All fines and penalties are hereby suspended pending internal investigation. We appreciate your patience during this process. That same morning, local news crews began circling the neighborhood. A clip from the now viral HOA confrontation had been picked up by a regional station. Their headline, Veterans Memorial Day Tribute labeled nuisance by HOA neighbors pushback. A camera crew knocked on Jack's door by noon. He didn't say much, just confirmed the display, confirmed the fines, and showed them the now repaired placard of CPL Dry's Reed. But what he didn't say spoke volumes. The image of Jack standing beside his flag display, quiet, calm, and unwavering, was all the station needed. The clip aired on the 6 o'clock news. Karen saw it. She sat alone in her home office, hands trembling slightly as she scrolled through the comments. Public sentiment was brutal. Her name was being attached to words like petty, disgraceful, and power drunk. Then came the final blow. An emergency meeting was called, this time not by Karen. The board had voted without her. 5 members, led by Jeremy and Nancy, filed a motion to suspend Karen's presidency, citing abuse of authority, selective enforcement, and unauthorized disciplinary actions. The vote was scheduled for Friday. Karen's grip on Maple Ridge Estates was slipping, and everyone, including her, knew it. Jack didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He didn't post anything online. He just stood outside as the wind picked up again, and the flag rippled proudly behind him. Memorial Day was now just days away, and for once, it would actually mean something. Thursday morning, just one day before the emergency HOA vote, Jack found another envelope in his mailbox. This one was different, thicker, heavier, and sealed with a red sticker labeled confidential. No name, no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a single sheet of paper. "You're not the only one she's targeted." Thought this might help. A concerned resident. Jack hesitated. He wasn't one for cloak and dagger theatrics, but something about the weight of the envelope felt intentional. He took it inside, plugged the drive into his laptop, and clicked open the folder. What he saw changed everything. There were emails, dozens of them, some forwarded from a personal Gmail account, others pulled directly from internal HOA correspondence. Most were from or addressed to Karen. In one particularly damning thread, Karen corresponded with a landscaping contractor named Thomas Holloway, her cousin. The emails discussed a proposed community beautification initiative that would require mandatory rail landscaping for all homes with non-uniform front yards. Karen had planned to declare certain elements, flagpoles, raised flower beds, DIY, lighting, as violations, then use those citations to pressure homeowners into compliance. Compliance that, conveniently, included hiring Thomas's company at inflated rates. Jack scrolled through the attachments, cost breakdowns, vendor forms, and a drafted newsletter titled, "A Unified Look for a Stronger Community." The kicker? The first 3 homes flagged for early review were Jack's, Frank Ramsey's, and the Delgados. Jack's hand clenched around the mouse. This hadn't been about the flag. Not entirely. It had been a distraction, a pretense. The fines, the drama, the public spectacle. It was a smokescreen for Karen's backdoor deal. That afternoon, Jack walked straight to Jeremy Lang's house and showed him everything. Jeremy read in silence. Jaw tight. I had a bad feeling, he said, but I didn't know it was this deep. What happens now? Jack asked. Jeremy didn't blink. Now, we take it to the board, officially, and if we don't act, we become part of it. At 7 p.m. The board held a private executive session. The meeting lasted over 2 hours, and the blinds in the clubhouse stayed shut. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood that something big was happening. Karen didn't show her face. The evening. By nightfall, Jack stood in his front yard, Ray anchoring one of the flags that had come loose in the breeze. Linda walked out, wrapped in a cardigan, her face curious. What's going on? Jack handed her a printout. Karen's cousin. Landscaping scam. She planned to force half the neighborhood to pay for his services. Linda's eyes widened as she read. You're kidding. She used my flag to kick off a compliance sweep. We were the first wave. Linda sat down on the porch step, stunned. All of this to make money. Jack nodded. Control and profit. It wasn't about rules. It never was. The next morning, flyers went up on mailboxes around the community. Emergency. HOA VOTE tonight at 6 p.m. to clubhouse below in bold. Topic. Immediate removal of HOA President Karen Holloway by 5:30 p.m. The clubhouse was packed wall to wall. Residents clutched coffee cups, clipboards, and cell phones. Every face was alert, eyes forward. Karen arrived last. She walked in confidently, her hair perfect, clipboard in hand, but her usual air of dominance was gone. It was replaced by something quieter, uncertainty, maybe even fear. Jack sat near the back, expression unreadable. Jeremy stood and cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the vote, we need to discuss something serious. New evidence has come to light regarding unethical behavior involving a landscaping contract proposed by our current HOA president. Guests ripple across the room. Jeremy held up a printed email thread. This board has confirmed that the president used HOA violations as leverage to push a contract to a company run by a family member, without disclosure or board approval. Karen stood suddenly. That's hearsay. You have no right. Jeremy interrupted. We have signed statements, financial records, and internal communications. Silence. He turned to the audience. It is the recommendation of the board that Karen Holloway be removed from her position, effective immediately. The vote was quick. Hands shot up across the room. The final tally, 42 in favor, 3 opposed. Karen stood frozen, her face pale, jaw clenched. For the first time, she had no words. She left the clubhouse quietly, alone. And Jack, he didn't speak. He didn't cheer. He just stood in the back, arms folded, watching the door swing close behind her. Tomorrow was Memorial Day. And for the first time in years, the neighborhood was free to honor it without fear, without fines, and without someone weaponizing the rules for personal gain. The next morning, the neighborhood awoke to something it hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. There were no new fines on mailboxes, no early morning surveillance SUVs creeping down the street, no threat of non-compliance looming like a storm cloud. It was Memorial Day at last, and for once, it felt exactly like it should. Jack Whitaker stepped out onto his front lawn at 7:02 a.m., coffee in one hand, a small U.S. Marine Corps flag in the other. He walked to the base of the large American flag still standing proud in the middle of the yard, took a knee, and placed the Corps flag beneath the name placard of SKD. Brian O. single quotes Melly. Then he stood slowly and looked around. Something was different. The entire street, both sides, was lined with flags. Some hung from porches. Others were planted in flower beds or set into mailbox brackets. Kids had painted red, white, and blue signs. Elderly neighbors sat on porches, dressed in old uniforms or t-shirts marked Army Dad and Proud Navy Mom. A woman Jack didn't know walked over from the next block, holding a large folded banner. "This belonged to my father," she said. "Fought in World War II. I thought maybe he'd want to be here." Jack nodded once and helped her secure it to her fence. By 9 a.m., the front lawn at 31st Sycamore Lane had become the quiet heart of the community. People brought lawn chairs. Someone set up a small speaker and played taps. The Delgados handed out small paper flags to kids. Frank Ramsey stood tall in his dress blues, saluting the main flag while tears silently ran down his cheeks. Jack stood near the edge of his lawn, hands in his pockets. Linda joined him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "They showed up," she said quietly. He nodded. They did. At 10 a.m., the new HOA president, Miss Jenny from across the street, stepped forward and tapped a spoon against a mason jar. "I won't make a speech," she said with a soft smile. "But I will say this: sometimes rules need to be questioned, not because we don't value order, but because we value something more, each other." She held up a framed certificate. "On behalf of this board and this neighborhood, we want to recognize Jack Whitaker not just for his service, but for his strength in standing firm when it counted most." Polite applause followed, then more, rising into a full ovation. Jack, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, stepped forward and accepted the certificate. He gave a brief nod and said, "Only one thing. I didn't do anything special. I just didn't move." Those 5 words landed heavier than a speech ever could. Afterward, Jack stayed out front for hours, talking with neighbors, helping a boy adjust his tiny flag, shaking hands with people who once kept their distance. Even those who had remained silent during the fight now offered soft thank yous and long overdue respect. And as the sun began to dip behind the rooftops, casting a golden light across the flags, a quiet moment passed between Jack and Frank. "She's really gone?" Frank asked, watching the clubhouse down the street. Jack nodded. "Moved out last night. Couple board members helped her pack." Frank chuckled softly. "Funny how fast the world changes when people stop being afraid." They stood in silence a while longer, watching the flags move in the breeze. Later that week, the HOA board issued a formal statement, effective immediately. Holiday memorial displays, particularly those honoring military service, are exempt from yard decor restrictions for the duration of federally recognized observances. "We regret any prior enforcement that failed to reflect the values of this community." The fines against Jack were officially expunged, his record wiped clean. But more importantly, the neighborhood had changed, not just on paper, but in spirit. People began talking more, walking more, helping each other more. The rule book didn't disappear, but it finally became what it should have been all along: a guide, not a weapon. Karen Holloway never returned to Maple Ridge Estates. Rumor had it she moved to a gated community across town, one with even stricter regulations. But here, no one mentioned her name much anymore, not because they forgot, but because they moved forward. Memorial Day came and went, but Jack's flag stayed up just a little longer that year. No one asked him to take it down, and when he finally did, he folded it carefully, placed it back in the case by his mantel, and whispered the same thing he did every year: "Semper Fi. I'll see you next May." And this time, the whole neighborhood would be ready to stand with him.